Hey everybody, David Rosello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of Growing Your Firm podcast. Today's guest is John Thompson. He is the former national advisory partner in a top 10 firm, and John is now known as the advisory guy. He is the MD of CAS UK in Ireland, providing firms that want to get serious about advisory with the software and training they need to structure and leverage advisory in their practices. I was talking with John right before the interview, and I said, John, we hear this word all the time. We've tried to demystify it on the show, but how do we make this accessible for everybody? And he said something to me that I think we're going to get into a little bit. He goes, you know what, David? Every accounting firm I've talked to, they're already doing advisory, even if they don't know it yet. So I'm really excited to dig into today's interview. But first, John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for people not familiar with you or your practice, just at a high level, what do you typically do and who do you typically do it for?
Well, our business is CAS, as you can see over my right shoulder there, the complete advisory solution. And we work with practices, both large and small, from let's call them maverick sole practitioners up to top 100 firms in the UK and Ireland, giving them software tools, structure and process, and perhaps more important than anything, belief that they can leverage and scale advisory in their practices.
Yeah. Well, what have you found to be constructive or maybe not all that constructive about using the word advisory? Let's start there.
Well, I would reiterate what you said earlier in our earlier discussion. I've never met a single accountant yet who was not already doing advisory. Most of the time it's not structured. It can be very ad hoc. Sometimes, unfortunately, clients don't even recognize it's happening. And worse still, sometimes accountants don't even charge for it. But what I'd like to ask the listeners to do is get the word advisory, put it in your back pocket, leave it there for a few minutes. Let's just talk a bit more about advisory. And when you get that word back out, I think it'll mean something completely different to you.
Great. Well, let's dive in. How should we start thinking about it if we're putting it in our back pocket?
Well, let's start by thinking about the client. Yeah, I think all of our listeners would agree that we want the clients to be successful. We want to look after them to the best of our ability. We want them to do a bit better. So when we're looking after clients, let's just start with a simple definition. We want all our clients, and we're going to help them do better and support them to do better. And I'm sure everyone will agree with that. We care about them. We want them to succeed. We want to look after them. If we start with that premise, then everything we do is going to be targeted towards the client. So we need to understand what they want. There's a lot of talk out there about what clients need, but it's very difficult to tell a client what they need if you don't understand what they want. So the starting point is, what do clients want? And every client's slightly different. Some clients want to grow their businesses really quickly. Some are quite happy roughly with about the size they are, and they want to just grow a little bit incrementally. Others, maybe it's a family business and they're just the custodian of the family business. So massive growth is not something that they desire or seek. So the starting point is, what does the client want? Once we understand that, then it's very easy or much easier to have a conversation and say, hey, David, you want to do the following. And you go, yes, John. And then I say to you, okay, if you want to do the following, then you need to think about these things in order to help you do what you want to do. So there's this kind of primary function, this primary understanding of what is driving this particular client, and accepting every client's different. Just looking at a set of accounts and a set of numbers, it doesn't give us enough information. It doesn't give us the whole story. We need to understand what's beyond the numbers. So a little model that I'd say people can use is think about primary, secondary, tertiary, 3 levels. The primary advisory services is, what does the client want? What's their goals, their dreams, their ambitions? What do they want for themselves, their family? What do they also want for the business? So there's 2 sides to that, the personal and the business. And this is all within advisory, all within helping and supporting clients do better. That leads into saying, if we understand what clients want, then we can start helping them put a plan together, or plans, to achieve both their personal and business aspirations. That's the primary level. This is incredibly liberating for accountants, because once you drop down to the secondary level, which is where most accountants start, the accountant can decide which secondary services they want to offer. But the point of reference is, what's the client's plan? What do they want to do? And each client, as I said earlier, is slightly different. But these secondary services vary enormously. Some bigger firms, for instance, will offer HR services. Some of them may even offer, certainly in the UK, we've got these mixed professional practices now where they might even offer legal services. But the vast majority of accountants will go, hey, that's not for me. So they leave those alone and just concentrate on the services they want to offer, but it's their choice. So these are the massive opportunities they've got. Which services does the accountant and their practice want to offer that will help the client progress their plans? Tertiary is all the services the accountant won't offer or can't offer, but maybe the client still needs help in certain areas. But that's when the accountant can put on their facilitator, concierge hat and say, we can help you with these areas at the secondary level, but we know these other people, maybe some HR experts or marketing experts or lawyers, etc., and introduce them at the tertiary level. But the accountant is still in control of the client relationship, because they're working at the primary level and at some of the secondary level.
I love that. Well, the way I'm thinking about this too is, it would probably even be useful for a firm owner, and this is just kind of how I'm conceptualizing it. You're going to have small business owners that you're working with, and they're probably going to want to either grow or become more profitable or stay the same. I think you can categorize them in maybe like one or three buckets. Like, we want to just stay stable, everything's good, we just want to stay out of trouble, keep things running. Then there's kind of like, we want more cash, we want more profit. And then there's like, we want growth. And I think for the listener, you could start to like think about services that maybe would fit in your expertise or in your depth, and then other ones where you're like, okay, when we really get into, advanced tax strategies that fall under maybe profit maximization, we either need to hire somebody outside and bring them in our firm to do that, or we need to drop that to the facilitator level like you had talked about. Is that a good way to kind of start thinking about where you might land in these levels?
I think that's a pretty good explanation, David, and I would expand on what you said, because the way tax works in most practices is a pretty good model for the way advisory services should work. So in tax, just about everybody in the practice is doing, let's call it, lower level tax work. And then when it gets a bit more complicated, the less people in the practice are doing, let's call it, the super clever stuff. And then when it gets really niche and really advanced tax strategies, maybe in some practices they go, actually, this is a bit tricky. Maybe we need to bring in somebody to do this particular piece of work. And that maps out the way advisory services can work. Understanding what the client wants, providing them with particular tax advice in certain areas that the accountant in the practice is familiar with, really comfortable with. But where there are tricky areas or more complicated areas, more advanced tax strategies, at a tertiary level, bringing in outside expertise. Got it.
Well, yeah, I think that's really interesting too, because sometimes when you hear about advisory, you think that you need to spin up a new group, but it sounds like what you said earlier, you're already doing it, and or there's probably clients demanding that you do it. It's those pesky clients that keep asking you questions around something, and maybe it's because they do want to grow and you don't know, or maybe it's because they do want to save money and you don't know that. But it feels like in a lot of cases, advisory will be pulled out of you. You don't have to like sit together with this master blueprint. You kind of have to just reflect on your client base that you already know so well. And I think that could give you a sense of maybe where you need to lean into.
That's where to start. We're talking about having regular conversations with, to start with, let's say, our best clients. Another good place to start is with all new clients, because with new clients, you can create a kind of advisory-led kind of induction process that this is what we do with every new client. So we fully understand what it is they want. We help them sketch out a plan to drive their personal affairs forward and their business affairs forward. And we can replicate that across our existing clients. So one little one little mechanism, for instance, that a number of firms we work with use. They have an advisory-led, very conversational, goal-driven induction process for new clients. So they start the new client as an advisory and compliance client from day one. And then they can go to their best existing clients and they can say, hey guys, we've got this great new induction process we use for our new clients. And then the penny drop, the dime drop, that actually, why aren't we doing this with our best existing clients? So you're one of our best existing clients and we'd like to do this with you as well. So one of the things about that is you're telling the existing client that they're one of your best clients, that you have selected them to work with them. And that can get you into these regular conversations about what it is the client really wants.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let me ask you maybe a strange question, John, because we've been talking about advisory on the show for some time, and it feels like it's such a strong concept that every firm should be leaning into. So why aren't they? Is there a deep-rooted fear of not knowing what the service is exactly going to be like? Is it being timid about charging for these things? Like, what's holding every firm owner back from just leaning in if they're already doing these things, from calling it an official service and pricing it and just going?
I think part of the problem, David, is there is a kind of misleading message out there in the marketplace that advisory is all about businesses. And actually, it's much more than that. It's actually, as I said right at the start, it's all about the client. And the client may have a business, but even if they do have a business, their personal situation is usually the most important thing to them. And with most what we call owner-managed businesses, the smaller businesses, the business only exists as a vehicle to create wealth and lifestyle for the client. So the personal side, the wealth and lifestyle side, is equally important, if not more so, than the business. So one of the things that's coming out there from certain commentators is, oh, accountants are very good at this kind of work. And that really irritates me. And they also say things like, they haven't got the skill sets to do this kind of work. And again, that really irritates me, because what they're doing is they're setting up this scenario where to do advisory, you've got to be a business guru, you've got to be an expert, you've got to be a rock star accountant. And what we're saying to people is that's nonsense, because as we've said earlier, at a lower level, you're all doing advisory anyway. You're constantly advising your clients. And for accountants who may be, okay, they haven't quite got the belief and confidence in themselves, that I think mostly is because they're looking at certain so-called rock star accountants who are setting themselves up as business gurus, and they're going, oh, that looks a bit difficult. I'm not sure I can do that. And I would say you don't have to. Think about primary, secondary, tertiary, the really difficult stuff for tertiary level. You can bring outside people to do it, but everybody can have planning conversations with their clients about what it is they're wanting to achieve. And everybody can then say, these are the particular services at the secondary level that we will offer. And these services at the bottom level, the tertiary level, that maybe are a bit tricky, bit difficult, bit more demanding. And maybe at this point in time, the practice hasn't got the confidence to deliver those services. Bring in expertise from outside.
Yeah. It feels like one of the biggest blockers is either having these conversations with clients. So like you have a sense that they want these things, but you're nervous about maybe just asking them what they want because it's a uncomfortable conversation, or it could feel that way. But honestly, I wouldn't, I don't blame a doctor for asking me questions about my health. As a consumer or business owner, I also don't feel bad when somebody asks me questions about the health of the business or my goals or, whatever. And so it feels like that conversation and then just getting that initial price out the door, are some of the biggest blockers to leaning into what I think is one of the most transformational opportunities for any accounting firm in the ecosystem.
Most accounting practices, just going back to my points about belief and then also structure and process, they have high degrees of structure and process for instance, how they deliver tax returns. Pretty much everybody in the practice knows what happens when a tax return for a client needs to be completed. For advisory, we need that structure and process as well. We need to have our process in the practice that says, when we talk to clients, because we look after our clients, because we care about our clients, because we want to fully understand our clients, we need a structure and process, which is one of the things CAS delivers, in order to make sure that we're looking after our clients properly. And those conversations will reveal what help is required by the clients. Some of the stuff we could probably have guessed, but some of it will be surprising to us and to the client.
Yeah. Well, once you get that information, how do you package it? I guess, to extend that analogy of medicine, it's like you're trying to invent a new surgery, or that's what it feels like, for a lot of firm owners. I'm learning this new thing. My client's asking me for a new procedure. Oh, goodness, I have to go invent a new process to, this new surgery to do so. And so once you get this information, how do you then, as a firm owner, package it into a service without it being so broad and so overwhelming and so kind of, I've never heard advisory being not profitable. We'll call it not profitable. How do you take that and package it?
The starting point would be just as, for instance, I had a dental checkup yesterday, and I go to the dentist twice a year for a checkup. And the way it works with us, we pay a monthly fee to the dentist, and we go twice a year for a checkup. And if there's extra work being done, let's call it basic extra works included within the monthly fee, but then more complicated stuff, unfortunately, you have to pay a bit extra for. Well, we can apply that to how we deliver advisory service to accountants. To start with, for our best clients, we can say that we will meet with them on a quarterly basis, and we will charge a certain fee for that, and we will go through certain, let's call it planning and review processes on a regular basis, and that would be included on a monthly fee. So certainly in the UK and Ireland, there's a massive growth in sort of a subscription-based accounting services packages where there's a, let's call it a simple package where annual accounts are done, and maybe monthly management accounts and tax returns are submitted, etc., etc. That is a package in itself. We can add to that and say, that's our basic package. Maybe, Mr. Client or Mrs. Client, you would like to have an enhanced package. The enhanced package includes these extra meetings, which are very much forward-looking and very much about planning and dealing with what the client's priorities are, the future priorities. And then there's the opportunity to have a third, let's call it bells and whistles package, which has got all sorts of extra things in it. And it's very easy to put together. But the basic principle is, just as we go to the dentist on a regular basis, clients should be talking to us as accountants on a regular basis. And some clients will say, no, thanks. And others will go, great, I want to talk to you even more, because funny enough, every time we talk to a client, isn't it funny how extra work occurs? But there needs to be this regular conversations, these regular planning meetings.
Yeah, what's funny though, the dentist example is amazing, right? If you're paying a monthly subscription to your dentist, you're going to that checkup twice a year, right? You are going there, but if it's on the patient to always schedule these things, or in this case, always on the client to schedule these things, what happens? Life happens, you don't go, you forget an appointment, you only go once a year, you go once every other year, it's out of mind, out of sight. But when you get into a subscription package, which I love, even if you have a base package that says, look, quarterly, we're going to touch base on what you're thinking about for the rest, for next quarter, or for the rest of the year, or next year, and just having that conversation and pricing it at the lower level, I think is a great way to start to introduce part of your client base into having more forward-facing conversations. I'm planning on buying this new business. I'm planning on making a big hiring spree. I want to actually start pulling out profit distributions in a year. So what do I need to do to get set up? All of these things will start to surface that the client's probably never going to ask you about if it was not for those consistent check-ins that they're already paying for. So I think every firm should really consider this option.
One of the great liberating things about this, David, is that at this primary level, about this understanding what's going on with the clients and what their priorities are and what they wanted to achieve, at that level, we as professionals do not have to have the answers, because it's at the secondary level we have the answers. So the primary level is very much about questioning and listening and pulling ideas together and helping the client clarify that this really is important to them. It is something they really want to do, and sketching out the plan. But the delivery, the detailed delivery, where yes, we do have to have the answers to satisfy the needs that were identified by the wants. So there's an opportunity to build real leverage in the business, because it doesn't necessarily fall that the experts at the secondary level need to do the primary work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll say this, and I don't know if I made an offer like this on this show, so we'll see how it works. But look, if somebody's listening right now and you've had one of these advisory conversations, maybe you worked with John, maybe you haven't, but if you've had one of these advisory conversations and it's gone well, you've learned something, you've created a new service, shoot me a note, david@jetpackworkflow.com. I'm going to ship you a physical copy of our book, Double Your Accounting Firm. I'll also shoot it over to John if you would like for me to share your story with him, because I think this is such a good play for any accounting firm owner to make. Have these conversations, figure out what your clients want, figure out what you could be doing better, and craft service offerings around those. I guarantee you there's going to be some real insights that come from this.
Absolutely. I mean, there's some key questions that every client we've heard about or worked with has always wanted to. So how important is it to you, the business owner, to feel in control of your own destiny? And nearly every client on a scale of 1 to 10 will give you a 9 or 10. It's everyone wants to feel they're in control, and at times like we are going through at the minute, people feel more out of control. So therefore, it's really important to feel more in control. The second question is, so how proud do you feel of your business on a scale of 1 to 10? And typically, people will not give you 9s and 10s. People will give you 4 to 6. As soon as they give you 4, 5, or 6, you've identified a gap. You've identified a gap between that and 9 and 10, because everybody wants to be 9 and 10. And that gap means they're open to talking about things that will help them move from 4, 5, and 6 to 9 and 10. The third question is, how successful do you feel now? And that will vary, but it's not uncommon to get 5s and 6s again. So if I'm a 5 or a 6 and I want to be a 9 and a 10, I'm going to listen to you. And if you turn around to me and say, right, when's the last time you sat down and you put a 3-5 year plan together for how you want to develop your personal finances and improve them, how you want to develop the business in order to improve your personal finances? Most business owners will go, can't remember. And these are the conversations, very easy conversations we can have with clients.
And boy, I love these example questions, because I think it really illustrates how you can go from being a reactive accountant to being a proactive advisory accountant. We've talked about prices in the past, but just to solidify it in the listener's mind, if they haven't seen past episodes, what is, give me the benchmark of what a tax return typically goes for, is priced at, and then what an average advisory monthly subscription is priced at.
Well, in the UK, unsurprisingly, I'm sure it's the same in the States, there are geographical differences. So, it's not surprising that, a tax return for a client in London is usually more expensive than a tax return for a client in, say, the north of Scotland.
Sure.
What's interesting is to say, well, let's not think about the absolute numbers, but think about the percentage differences. So the firms we work with, we will say to them that they should expect that they will transition about 20% of their client base from a pure advisory relationship into a pure compliance relationship into an advisory compliance relationship. And by doing so, they will build that fee up from £1 of compliance into £2 of advisory. So for 20% of their client base, on average, we are seeing firms triple the fees. We have some firms and some accountants in firms that we've nicknamed the monsters, and the monsters blow those stats out of the water. And if we could bottle up what these people do and sell it, we'd all make a lot of money very quickly. But we have some accountants who, on that £2 advisory to £1 compliance ratio, are achieving 8 and 9 times of the £1 compliance. They're getting £8 and £9 advisory to £1 compliance. And it's because they're having different conversations and they're talking about what really, really matters to clients.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I mean, there's such a big opportunity. If anybody's listening right now and you have an accounting firm, there is so much opportunity in your client base to have these conversations. And your clients, if you do this well, are going to be happy to pay more. They want these services. They're struggling to figure out how to navigate this kind of ocean of work or ocean of questions. And they want somebody that they can work with that feels like they are future facing and proactive. And the best clients will pay more, and the best clients are going to stick around longer once they do that. John, this is a really fun conversation. I hope everybody is jotting down notes. I'm going to talk about how you can access some of the notes after. But if somebody wants to reach out, say thank you, connect with you, hear more examples or more questions they might be asking, what is the best way for the audience to connect with you?
You can either email me directly at johnt@completeadvisorysolution.com, or you can look me up on LinkedIn, JF Thompson, John F. Thompson, the advisory guy, or go to our website, completeadvisorysolution.com.
I love it. I love it. And if you couldn't write down everything from today's episode, you can always go to jetpackworkflow.com/blog. That's jetpackworkflow.com/blog. We're going to do a full 1,000+ word write-up. We're going to link up all the resources John just mentioned and so much more. And if you enjoyed this episode, leave a review, help us get the word out. If you really loved it, share it with a fellow firm owner that needed to hear this type of information. John, it's been a real treat, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Pleasure, David.